Hi, and welcome to Design Office Hours. I'm Peter Buckle, your host, and this is the show where we talk about design, designers, and careers in design. I talk about creating, leading, navigating creative work at this place we call work. This show is also about your input, so send your topics and questions. As usual, get in touch with me via email, designofficehours@peterbuckle.com. Type it, record it, AI voice it, send it, and follow me on Instagram at designofficehours. And last but not least, head over to peterbuckle.com/designofficehours to sign up for my mailing list and get notified when a new episode gets released. All right, what do we have for today on the menu? We have a question about burnout. This is a topic the people who know me know that I'm quite passionate about it. And our question today is, what helps you to prevent burnout or stress when designing? Great question. In fact, I'm getting this question a lot from young people that are entering design school, some people that are going to or, well, have already entered design school or are about to and are just generally concerned about this topic. But also people that are starting out on their first job and sort of feeling the heat of the battle and that this could be all rather overwhelming. So yes, this is a true thing. In fact, me, myself, I've been probably close to a burnout once. And I think what kind of pulled me back from this edge was that I was surrounded by good people. I had a good manager who stopped me in my tracks and basically said, hey, you gotta have to stop doing what you're doing or change the way you do it, because right now this leads probably to a place that's not really good for you. And in hindsight, I was very thankful for that, and it was a sign of having a really great manager who was just very observant and really cared about this. So let's get on with this question. I think designing your mind is how you design your work or the output that you're producing as a designer. And how to navigate stress, I think, is a key part of how to not get on this slippery slope that at the end has something like burnout, or burnout is probably the worst case of it. So yeah, working in design on the job, studying design, both can be stressful. And I think a lot comes down to how we let stress affect us. And I think the good news here is we are not choiceless. This may seem choiceless when we're in the middle of this, but we have choices to not have stress affect us. We also have tools, we can develop habits, and all of this can lead to, or ideally leads to, being a lot more self-aware and staying really calm when a storm is approaching. So I want to distinguish my response into two parts. And I give a few pointers and eventually how these also evolve when we're going into design school and then after design school, switching on to our first job. And this is a different environment, right, than design school. Suddenly there's a hierarchy, there's a manager, there are other people, there are projects. While in design school, you have some of this as well. You also have other people and somewhat of a structure, but you're also not having like a 9-to-5 situation or a sort of schedule that resembles a workday. It's a different environment to navigate. And eventually you're coming also into that environment younger. You're not, you're starting out. When you're starting out let's say you study a 4-year course, at the beginning of this course, and then when you graduate, you are ideally a very different person, right? Because that means you have undergone change. And ideally how to navigate and manage stress has become part of your skill set at that point, or at least it's the sort of, it's a good starting point of that skill set. It's a first iteration of this. So when one enters design school, I think for me, I think I compare it always with, it's like stepping on a launch pad so that you can go on a rocket ride. And flying on board of a rocket is not really a comfortable thing, right? There's a lot of stuff that's very rocky. It's a very rocky ride until you reach higher orbit. Again, you see I'm a bit of a space nerd. You reach higher orbit that eventually is sort of like halfway through or maybe graduated, and you start to navigate the world around you with less rockiness. So it's a rocky ride and it puts a lot on you. And I would think, there's a lot that's put on you that is not knowing things, figuring things out. New skills have to be trained. Your brain has to be reformatted to see, think, and act like a designer. You also need to learn new tools. Suddenly you have to go to a workshop, you have to build things, and ideally this comes easier to you. If not, again, double time to make it work. So yes, all of this can be stressful, and guess what? I think to some extent that is okay. Being pushing yourself, being challenged either by yourself or by the teachers around you will come at the extent of comfort. In fact, within the comfort zone, there is no learning curve, right? Learning doesn't really feel comfortable because it is about challenging and questioning things and learning how to first work with a little bit of a new skill and making mistakes and failing until the skill is sort of properly matured and your mistake rate eventually goes down. And yes, it is not comfortable working long hours on campus or at home or pulling an overnighter in the shop or an overnighter to get your model done or your presentation or whatnot, right? And that is not unnormal, but it should also not become the normal. And there we have it. This is about a balance. This is about like learning how to ride a bicycle. If you lean on one side, if you lean too much on one side, you're gonna fall over, and worst case, you get hurt. First advice I gave is get organized. And it sounds very simple, but it is shockingly not as simple to most people, including myself, right? There are some people this comes naturally to it. There are some others this just needs a little bit more time work. It just needs more work to get organized. I think in general, I found myself getting organized rather easy, but then you also have learning curves and how you get organized better and etc., etc. So learning how to stay calm when a storm is approaching, I think, is usually a big energy saver. I think we're using a lot of our energy when we're feeling anxious, when we're feeling worried, when we're worrying about hypothetical problems and scenarios. And worrying is like using your creative energy against you, right? So if you have a lot of creative energy, you might become a good worrier or a strong worrier. Not a warrior, you're a worrier. So we have to learn how to break an overwhelming amount of problems or tasks down into something that's a little bit more bite-sized, overseeable, and it's just less scary to take on. It's also less distracting because you can now guess and sort of gauge, okay, this will take this much, this will take that long, this will cost me here this amount of energy, time, money, whatnot. So once we've done that, we can start working on it. We can plan things out. When do we do what? How do we do what? Etc., etc. With that, we can set things into context. And context, I think, is something really important, right? I think I believe it's probably one of these things that is quite underrated or underestimated or not talked about enough, what it means to put things into context. Without context, even the smallest single thing can start feeling overwhelming depending what else is going on in your life or in your head, right? So context is so important, I think, because with context, you can start measuring how important is something and in what time and how urgent actually is it, or is there actually a hierarchy that puts things into their place, right? Like, oh, you know what? This felt very urgent, but guess what? Actually, you measure to this and compared to this is going on, I think I can actually do this later on in time, or I don't even have to do it to the highest fidelity ever possible. That's something I'll talk about later, right? So context is super important. With that established, we can start making choices. Making choices is part of growth. In fact, change and making choices, and they're obviously tightly related to each other, is something that will be with you for forever. In your personal life, in your professional life, in all of the spaces in between, making choices, get good at it, right? And we can have a whole set of questions on just how to make good choices, or choices in general. Sometimes time and other aspects will tell how good the choices were. And then you have to live with that as well. So you heard me saying on previous talks and my portfolio relevant episodes that when I'm looking at a portfolio or interviewing a candidate, I'm interested in how candidates make choices. So making choices, super important. So that was about getting organized, right? Getting organized allows us to gain higher ground, oversee things, chop them up into bite-sized parts, and then we can start putting things in context so we can calm down and can start executing when things matter, when they start to matter. Second, and this might be a little bit of a weird advice, but find something else outside of design. Find something to do that has nothing to do with design. Although as you grow in your career or in your new establishing mindset as a designer, you will figure out it can be quite hard to find something that has nothing to do with design. Because as you start to decipher the world around you through the lens and the eyes of a designer, there's design in everything. And there's also a lot of bad design in everything. In fact, most of the design we're surrounded by is actually bad. Little excursion there. Let's get back to this. Find something else to do outside of design. joining design school is a good time to let go of some hobbies, but also it's a very good time to adopt some new things, some new hobbies, habits, etc. For example, I don't know, join a running club, join a hiking group, lift weights, and my favorite, of course, people notice by now, ride a bike. Ideally, ride a bike up a very steep hill, but that's just personal preference. So figure out what works for you, but make sure you can do it regularly and not just on weekends. And ideally, very much ideally, it is something that gets you active. And most importantly, it gets you out of the house into nature. And ideally, it doesn't matter, rain, sunshine, go. Unless, I don't know, you live somewhere it's like minus whatever cold, right? But even then, so something that gets you going, gets your body going, gets you away from your desk, gets you away from this headspace called design that you're maybe absorbed in. And this is where you gain distance from the things you're doing. This is where you have to focus on something, right? If you ride your bicycle, you have to focus on the road, ideally. I mean, depends how you ride, but there's something in front of you that requires navigation. So you gain distance and you start thinking about these problems and whatever you just left behind for a few hours. You start thinking about this from a high altitude. And again, that puts us back into putting things in context. There you have it. Context is all around us. Third advice, calm your mind. Now, this relates obviously to the two previous points, and it's easier said than done, right? Somebody says, "Oh, calm down," and sometimes, or most of the time, that actually gets even more going. Calm your mind. Hear me out on this. As you eventually joining design school and you have a whole new schedule, you will figure out that, okay, some old hobbies I may probably have to pause, or I have to, cut them very short, and then I have to adopt new ones. So here's a new one, right? Joining a design school or a new job, or in general entering work life, I think it's also a good time, a good moment in time to look at some things that are practices or techniques that actively work with your mind and try to get it to a calmer cadence, right? So it's probably a good time to adopt something like a meditation practice that calms your operating system down on a regular basis, right? I do it twice a day, ideally, but once a day is already something that I would think people should celebrate as an achievement. People who know me know that I'm a strong advocate for meditation. As other side effects that I will not get into here too much, but you can start this without getting too fancy about it, right? I mean, and again, there are plenty of pathways to it, to this, right? If you're the type of guy that needs, if you're the type of person that needs an app for this, go and get an app. If you're the type of person who needs a YouTube guided video, meditation, whatever, go do this. Whatever it is that gets you going, do it. If this is your least way of resistance, start doing it. Ultimately, this will help you to zoom out, calm down, see what something is really about. While maybe important, it is usually not as tragic, especially measured in, again, context. All right, the next part is surround yourself with people. Now, this may sound also simple or maybe confusing, but I think the new ways, I think I would call it evolved ways, how we have been doing things in parts or, well, in smaller parts or not so small parts, such as remote learning, right? Zoom. We're not leaving, well, there might be a tendency that we're not leaving our house as often as we used to, right? I think young people need to get into offices, they need to get onto campus, they need to be surrounded with other people, not just young people, actually, all people. So I think remote learning, Zoom, etc., these are all good tools and things that are here to stay to some extent. But generally speaking, we need to be with other folks. We are social creatures. Now, being in design school and starting out on a job, right? This is a lot about building relationships, and you build relationships that are strong and long lasting when you're with other people. When you, again, as I said earlier, when you hammer out a night in a workshop because you have to get a model done, right? That is bonding right there. Trust me, I've been there. So the relationships you build during your study time can become some of the most important and some of the most influential that you will ever build. Same, this counts for every job. I have I think the biggest network and the strongest I have from my time being a student, as well as from my first job, Philips Design, where you had a huge design team and you just networked the hell out of it. And we can get to networking and the do's and don'ts of that in a different episode. So surround yourself with other people. I think this has to be pointed out these days because, again, there are now other methods of getting to content, getting to learning, meeting people, and that is in the digital world. That all has its place. But I think getting out being with other people while you're studying or after or on the weekend is important, because again, it puts things in context. When you start talking to people and let's say you're the overwhelmed kind and you hear that other people may have the same problem or like a different iteration of the same problem, right? It's sort of, okay, we're in this boat together. You are not alone. And a lot of feeling overwhelmed comes from this other feeling that is called feeling alone. And usually you are not. You are feeling alone when you are in fact alone. So get out, meet other people, and start learning this habit or this skill of like building good relationships that lead to good networks, and those will carry on for a long time. All right, the next point is, how is this eventually all evolving when you're starting out on the first job, right? So let's say you have left design school behind you and you enter the world of work, and most of my earlier points apply here, but I would think with a little add or nuance to it. So when you enter the job, you're joining a design team, right? Let's say I'm speaking in a classic case. You will learn that there's always more work than there are resources in a company. There's always more problems to solve and things to do than there's time in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year. So it has to be, again, balanced. And I think work is also something the workplace will always take from you more than it gives. As a controversial saying, I know you can call me out on this, but hear me out. So not everything at work is a mission to Mars or Moon, depending where you want to go, right? Not everything is this 100%, I give it all and I design the best version of it. In a company, there are priorities, and then there are things that are left and right of these priorities. And some of these left and right things are important and some of them are in blind spots, right? But it doesn't mean that you are the one, A, single-handedly going to solve it, or B, that yes, it's not the priority, but it's also important, but it's just not at the priority. So learning how to throttle is, I believe, a key aspect of learning how to navigate work. When do I put in 100%? And when is it just okay to just solve it, right, in its best possible way, given the constraints, and then let it be? There is, in my experience, this notion in especially in designers, right? We always want to strive to give this 100%, want to make the best version of what this could be. On the job, that is not always necessary. And this might be a hard truth. And one might say, oh, but then we're not doing the best design. Well, guess what? The best possible design may not be the right solution for what is at hand. There are things that are just prioritized lower, and then yes, you're being put on them or they land on your desk, and you have to sort of learn, either the hard way or with advice, or somebody tells you ideally, how much of a priority, how much energy has to be put in here, right? If you get 10 things to do on, if you get 10 things on your desk and they all have to get done tomorrow at the same time, guess what? Very quickly, this will not work out. So learning how to throttle, what is a priority, what is a lesser priority. Again, there's a hierarchy, right? And in this case, though, the hierarchy, it's established by the people you report to. It's established by the work that the team takes on. And I've seen enough times that a designer is just simply burning out on something that they have to work on, but they have sort of lost focus that how important is this, right? In the grand scheme of things. How far can I push the other team? How far will they push me? If they push me a lot, maybe I can just be okay with something. And it doesn't mean we're not doing our job, but eventually we're just navigating and landing the plane as in like, okay, this is good enough. This is good enough for that type of effort, right? Because we have to get back and work, design, develop, do whatever on the strategic priority we have. So that is very common. And I think people, young designers who are entering the workforce can appear confused about this. Like, oh, wait. Not everything is the best design ever possible on the planet. No, it's not. It's not, and that is totally fine. Prioritizing. So I just mentioned that the hierarchy, the agenda of what you're working on is kind of set for you, right? It doesn't mean that they're competing priorities. In fact, it happens very quickly that there are competing priorities because you have 2 projects assigned or 3 or more, and you have different people giving you input, and everything is urgent, and everybody thinks their thing is the most important thing, right? So if you're starting out on the job and this is new to you, or this all starts to feel like a little bit daunting, go talk to your manager, find a senior, and say, hey, here is what's on my desk. I need a sparring partner to help me prioritize this. Can you give me some context here, right? And again, if you're starting out on the job, it's not your main job, your main priority to battle the resourcing. Somebody else does that for you. And ideally, a good manager takes a lot of the noise away and communicates very clearly with you and sets the context. Isn't like, this is important so much. This is what we need to do here. This is how much will make us successful at this particular problem, right? So if nobody does that for you, go and ask. All right, the last point I want to talk about is, and I mentioned this earlier in the episode, I mentioned the term kitchen cabinet. So let me expand on this, because I think the kitchen cabinet is something that will last, or ideally stays with you for a long time throughout your professional life, but also personal life. And as you start building your network, and again, you start at university, you make these connections that last you for life, ideally, right? Not all of them, but some that you identify. And these people you start assembling like what I would call the kitchen cabinet. And this is a group of fine people that you have carefully selected and curated, a group of folks that you come across and you've built relationships with, and with people that you can call up for different types of advice or guidance that you may or may not need throughout your life in a professional context, but also maybe in the context of life decisions, right? Your kitchen cabinet may start at the professional side of things, and over the time it extends into, you add people that are good for giving you life advice, right? I would think if you're becoming a parent, then you may talk to somebody else to get some advice on that side of things, and it may not be a former boss or a former mentor. So the kitchen cabinet extends. But in short, it's a group of people that you can call up. You can call up for different things, different problems, different advice around career, maybe a job change or whatever, right? Maybe personal finances. Even there, you can call people up and say, hey, back then I remember you had this good thing, this advice. Can you talk to me about it, right? So start assembling it. Now, why is this? Why does it need effort? I think those are relationships that you have to maintain. You have to check in, not just when you have a problem, although ideally this type of relationship can be totally fine when you check in when you need advice. Not something you have to take out once a week for dinner, because that wouldn't be sustainable, right? Over time, these things evolve into sort of like a more clear, like mentor / guide / advisor relationship. And some of them can be friends. Some are just, previous work relationships. But I think what they should have in common, they give you good advice. They help you to see things from a different angle. They also know you from a different angle, right? So maybe a former manager, a former boss knows you from that particular angle very well. So this person might be a good candidate to approach for, hey, I'm thinking of this job role here, or I have this change at work happening. We have we have a reorganization at work. This is what happens. Can you help me to explain this? Help me navigating this from your experience, from your point of view, right? So build these things actively, maintain them, cultivate them. And I think this goes a long way, having this. And I think it also contributes to just peace of mind, right? When you know people that you can call up for something that just happens to you or just has happened, and now this has to be figured out. Again, it takes away that sense of feeling overwhelmed, feeling choiceless, not knowing what to do. Have a good kitchen cabinet. All right, that's it for this episode. All of what I mentioned in this context, I could talk for a long time and a lot more. And I think there's, generally speaking, a lot more to unpack. I kept this fairly high level and tried to give some advice that you can work with, as in like from a higher level. And ideally, you build your own awareness and train your muscles and establish habits that when push comes to shove, pull you away from the edge of approaching a burnout. And I think it's very important. It's something, again, I learned it the hard way. I think elements of this you will only learn the hard way, right? Figuring out what's the ultimate level of exhaustion you have is something good to know. It's like an athlete. Again, when you're riding a ride and you need once in a while this bike ride. I need it. That bike ride that just gets me to the breaking point. And in fact, I actively seek it. Now, that's probably a deep insight into my psyche here. But you need it just to know where do you stand? How resilient are you, right? Have all your red flag mechanisms, have they gone up if you reflect on it? So I think, again, some of these things, they will just happen to you, and it's more important what you'll learn from it and what you're going to do after. So I hope this was helpful. Again, it's a topic I'm quite passionate about. I can talk about it for a long time. This is also a topic that is as wide as it is deep, and we can deep dive. Let me know, and with the questions, send them either to my Instagram at designofficehours or my email designofficehours@peterbuckle.com, or head over to peterbuckle.com/designofficehours. There's a form you can fill out to also submit questions. Thank you for listening, and I hope you join me in the next episode. Now please go and ride a bike up a hill, ideally.